Hello, warm greetings to you all. You're welcome to the International Institute of Anthropological Applications, which is a virtual institute of Anthropological Association for Humankind. Through this institute, IIAA, we are organizing a course called Ambedkar and the Agenda for Nation Building. So this course is designed and offered, instructed by Professor P.D.Satyapal, sir, from the Department of Anthropology, Andhra University. So now I request Professor Satyapal, sir, to deliver his lecture.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. P.D.Satyapal, and a very good evening, friends. We join again for our seventh lecture in this series of 14 lectures, actually. We have so far seen Ambedkar's perspective with regard to society, with regard to caste and economy. We also have seen how his like analysis of cultural capital. We have seen, in fact, now like how Ambedkar has brought out the cultural aspects of structural violence. And then we also have seen the ideology behind the system of caste, and then the discourse, basically, how power mediates through discourse. And today we will discuss with regard to his religion, actually, his ideas with regard to religion, and as to how this particular aspect, in fact, is connected to our broad, say, theme, that his agenda for say nation building. This is not just, in fact, not talking about Ambedkar, but we want to say expound his anthropological, in fact, methodology in dealing with these several of these aspects of Indian society. So in this background, when we take up this aspect of religion, Ambedkar's involvement with religion, actually, or his dialogue with religion, rather, I would rather call it as, in fact, a kind of an interrogation of religion, to be more on the right side. So has been very, very vast and intense. He has written, like, in a sense, as many say books and articles on aspects like politics, constitutional, say relation aspects, democracy, economics, and he has spent, in fact, now as much say attention in both researching and then writing on the religion, actually, because he was very, very clear that the aspects of society, politics, and other many things, in fact, now in India, in a country like India, are very well integrally connected with the aspect of religion. So let's peep into that particular aspect as to how he has been shaped, and which kind of a theistic beliefs that he has been trained, and then his engagement with kind of a comparative religion, and also, in fact, his say very, very incisive kind of a study of different aspects of religion. And Ambedkar, during his lifetime, it is known, at the end of his life, he has conducted huge conversions. Probably in the history of India, after Ashoka, Emperor Ashoka, it was only Dr. Ambedkar who could achieve the feat of converting many people. Like, in a sense, in 1956, October 14, there were around 5 lakh people who converted to Buddhism, say, and then 3 days after, that was in Nagpur, October 14th. 3 days after, in Chandrapur, another 3 lakh people, in fact, followed the path showed by Ambedkar. So it was a huge kind of a thing, massive. So what led him to do that? So what was his basic idea, actually? Like, is it just simply a kind of a religious or a kind of a theistic, kind of a thing, or how come it is connected to his agenda of nation building? So this is the kind of a task set out for us. So we will look into his training, actually, or kind of a religious training and all. We know pretty well that Ambedkar has kind of a regimental kind of a background. His father, grandfather, and his maternal uncles, and from his wife's side, many of these people were in the army. Actually, we know like he has got a military background, and we come to know from his biography that he has a very strong Kabir Panthi background. Actually, his father was a Kabir Panthi, and way back in Maharashtra that time, or even like in the place where he was born and brought up for some time, that was in say uh, military headquarters of war near Indore, which of course was called as Maho actually. And later on, they shifted to Satara, and of course, much of his like in a sense life went in Maharashtra itself, then Mumbai. So we come to know that uh, Kabir Panth was the kind of a sect that his family was following, and he also got exposed to that particular say training. And uh, we do not really know, like in a sense, how far he understood Kabir Panth and then other kind of traditions that have been there and all. But when he was like in a sense around 50 years old, he wrote clearly saying that uh, he considered three people as his gurus. The first one is Buddha, second is Kabir, and third is Phule. So he announced that these three people, in fact, now has a lot of influence on him and his social and intellectual life. So therefore, what in Kabir, basically, like in the sense he must have seen, uh, and he himself, in fact, now tried to jot down at some place, talking about the influence of Kabir. Generally, like in the Indian history, these kind of people, like in a sense, Kabir we know is a Julaha, and then actually he was a Muslim, so that's we belong to that say that religious syncretic kind of say tradition, which of course were called as bhakti movements. Actually, that time in history talks about bhakti movements, but Kabir, Namdev, we know Ravidas, we also know Chokmela, and then say Ghasidas. There is a lot of tradition, in fact, no, like in the sense, uh, who have started their own kind of interpretation, and also their own kind of, in fact, like in the sense, uh, uh, exposure, say, to the religious sects as to how to, understand them among the common masses. So, although it is under the Hindu rubric, actually, the most important reason that Kabir must have appealed to Ambedkar, importantly, was the relational aspects of religion to human beings. Uh, Kabir, we know, like in a sense, uh, although as I've been saying that they have been under that rubric called as bhakti movements, this is some sort of a resistance kind of a movement. Actually, he was Kabir and then other, say those people, they say saints, kind of a reformers. They have been contesting against the intermediary between God and people, and they were trying to, in fact, now directly relate to the supernatural. And we know pretty well that they have been insisting upon the place of human to be central, actually, in their brand of theism. So Kabir, in fact, now there are several dohas. They're called as dohas actually, which in fact now he was trying to be very rational and then materialistic as well. In one of the dohas, he says that if you people ask me to worship a stone in the like a murti, a stone in the shape was shaped into God in the temple, why should I worship that? If stone ought to be worshipped, he writes saying that I would worship a mountain. And then he comes back and then says that why should I worship a mountain? I will worship that stone which is very useful for my existence. He says I will start worshipping the grinding stone. So many of his dohas, in fact, now like they had an exercise of rationality within the religious realm. Probably, like in fact, now modern Ambedkar, uh, who have been, in fact, now like fighting all through his life, a stiff was sort of a fight, bracing many of these hurdles and all, sometimes single-handedly. uh, obviously, like in a sense, must have attracted to this Kabir Pandit tradition from where he was trained actually. So, having seen that, let us also look into first what are Ambedkar's ideas on religion actually, and the very purpose of religion, because that can form as in fact now a kind of a background where from Ambedkar's engagement with religion starts actually. So Ambedkar's say like in a like engagement with religion is not just a peripheral kind of a thing. It was very much necessary for him in his movement of reconstruction of society on the basis of democratic values, and in his very critical in fact engagement with the religions which promoted inequality actually, and which practiced inequality. uh, so that has been very serious kind of a necessity for him. So therefore Ambedkar has did thorough study of religion, and he learned Sanskrit. He wanted to learn Sanskrit actually during his intermediate days, but in the school and also like at that time, Sanskrit was not allowed to be taken. In fact, no, by non like Shudras and Ati Shudras. So he studied Persian that time, but he has studied Sanskrit when he was in Bonn University, Germany, for 2 months just, and then in other from the sources, other and all, and he have been thoroughly quoting from the original sources whenever he wrote several of his books and booklets and essays on religion actually. And he learned Pali for 6 months in 1942 from a Buddhist monk from Kanpur called as Ishwardatt Medardhi. He learned it for 6 months and went ahead to write a Pali dictionary basically. So he was very thorough with the Pali sources of religious texts, especially the Buddhist and other canon. And he was also very well versed with the four different versions of Bible. Uh, During like 1938 and all through 1944, when particularly a delegation of Christian say pastors, they say visited him and then try to like in a sense convince him to take up Christianity. His engagement with him, in fact, which has been recorded, was a very thorough and then quite a deep engagement. And he was quoting us from different versions of Bible. He was saying that from King James version I picked up this particular thing, from Royal Ruby version I picked up this particular, from Gideon's. So when one of those delegates, a member of the delegations, Bishop Pritchard, he later wrote saying that he was in fact like quite surprised about the thoroughness of Ambedkar with the Bible. Ambedkar was also in fact well versed with Guru Granth Sahib when he was trying about the Khalsa movement and all. So his study basically, his exposure in fact now has been thorough. And another aspect is, my dear friend, like I just want to mention, his study is not just merely a descriptive science, but it's also a normative science. It is not simply a comparative religion, which he himself writes in his voluminous say text that he wrote with the title called as The Philosophy of Hinduism. In that particular text, almost for about 100 pages, he digs into the philosophies of religion, where he said his exercise is not just looking into comparative religion, but this is in fact now an exercise into digging up the theological roots of different kinds of faiths that say we see in human society. Yeah. So he says that in his like in a sense, look into philosophy of religion, he positioned himself saying that whenever he was using the word religion, he was meaning theology actually, and that those things in fact now connected with theology, the metaphysics that are connected with theology. So his analysis of say that philosophy of religion goes into the distinction of looking into the the typology of theologies that we have, the mythical theology, which in fact now concerns with the discourses on gods and their doings, then to civil theology, with regard to the rituals organized by the state towards the state as pronounced religion, and different classes under the religion. Actually, he was very was, eloquently dealing with those sorts of different classes within the theology, the revealed theologies, the types of natural theologies across the world, and he was also dealing with the revelational theologies. So therefore, his understanding with the religion is very, very systematic and scientific. Uh, there, in fact, now like finally going through a very elaborate and then a laborious exercise of looking into different religions, he tries to define religion as, I quote, an ideal scheme of divine governance, the aim and object of which is to make the social order in which humans live by a moral order, actually, unquote. So he was relating to the relation between the supernatural and the human beings, and a kind of a social order where morality is established. That was a kind of a definition he tries to make. And he has used anthropology very, very thoroughly with both the comparative religion, and also in fact no, with his scrutiny of different religions on the touchstone of say rationality and reason, and then its utility to the human society. That was main. So therefore his anthropological analysis of in religion deals with 10 different dimensions. He enlisted 10 dimensions, and he in fact now like in a sense couched different kinds of religions on this particular scheme. I'm not going to deal with all the 10 religions because our interest basically is what Ambedkar finally got out of it. He has done a huge exercise. So his premise is the relationship of humans with God and the type of society that is being built upon. So here he marks the distinction between an ancient society and a modern society. So in a preface which is very, very poignant and a moving preface that he wrote to a book called as What Congress and Gandhi Has Done to the Untouchables. In this book, the preface of the book, he has dedicated the preface to his friend, a woman. In fact, no, he didn't give the name. He just put it as F in quotes, and he wrote an elaborate, say, kind of a preface because it was published just, during 1943 and all. That was during the Second World War time. She is a British woman, and he was talking about their relations where they used to meet in the British Library, and he was referring to the long hours that they spent together reading and then looking and then researching into the Bible. So in that particular say preface, he was actually trying to define an ancient society and differentiate between the modern society. And there he was saying that he says that ancient society, the most dominant characteristic, in fact, now he says that it was a society of man plus God, while his definition of modern society is a society of men only. Of course, he was very, very particular to write later on saying that by using the word men, he was including women as well, because he was writing to a woman. He was a little sensitive with regard to that. So the point is, friends, he also tried to say in an ancient society, all aspects of religion, society are connected to the religion. He was bringing, in fact, no, a long reference from the Old Testament of the Bible, where he says that after the death of, say, Jacob, Naomi tells Ruth. So their discourse actually, he presents that particular thing, where Naomi tells Ruth, her daughter-in-law, because her son is now no more, she tells her that you can go back to your people. You can go back to your people, and then, in fact, now be a part of your own society. Where Ruth replies to her, she says that I'm not going anywhere. Your people are my people. Your nation is my nation. Your gods are my gods. So therefore, Ambedkar picks up that particular thing, says that in ancient religion, The nationality, the society, and religion basically are thoroughly intertwined. You cannot separate with. They are intrinsically related to each other. But we don't find that in a more modern society. And he goes on saying that, I quote, uh, as an Oriental, I belong to a society which is still ancient and in which God is a much more important member than man is. So here, in fact, now he rubs it with a kind of a rider, saying that in an Orient society, especially in Indian society, he's trying to put a rider saying that here gods are more important, or a god is more important than the very survival of the human being, which has been the problematic actually that he picks up all through his life, actually, all through his engagement with religion. So therefore, friends, he in his exercise of in fact now interrogating religions, he distinguishes between the religion of rules, or which of course he calls it as later on as a religion of prescriptions, from a religion of principles. So he categorizes two types of religions: religions of principles and religions of rules or prescriptions. And he tries to explain, saying that the religion of principles basically are religion of values, which of course he later on tried to equate both. He says that that particular type of religion prescribes free, equal, and self-respecting individuals practicing in a society, while the religion of rules or religion of prescription basically divides people into castes, makes them cower in the fear of unseen powers, and robs them of their associated life. So this has been, in fact, now his observation, rather, in fact, now his take-off point for his interrogation, in fact, now into the religions. So Ambedkar tries to, like in a sense, he sought to separate the religious attitude from the institutional trappings, religious institutional trappings, actually. So he says that like a genuine religious attitude becomes simply to act mindfully, to act with consciousness and responsibility, and not just to obey any rules laid out in advance. So this has been, in fact, now like in a sense, a religious person, Ambedkar tries to understand, should be a conscious person, should be, in fact, now a person with responsibility, and a person should act mindfully, not just simply, in fact, now like take on the kind of what you call commandments or dictats, basically. So he expects even an religious person must be a thinking personality, a responsible personality. So then he goes on to state his understanding of religion and his preference of religion. There he states, and I quote, a religion must not be theocentric, but it must be anthropocentric. Ambedkar uses, in fact, now these kinds of phrases. He says, generally, in a kind of a common parlance, we cannot envisage any religion without God. Any theology obviously connects to the supernatural. But here Ambedkar gives, in fact, a kind of a preference. He says a religion must not be theocentric, and he says it must be anthropocentric. Rather, in fact, if you can again re-say or put that as in a other phrase, he says that religion is for human, and human is not for gods, actually. So this is a kind of a very very what do you call significant like observation which he makes, and that has become very premise. So he claims that anything held higher than human is an erasure of humanity, actually. So he says that a religion must be useful to the society or individuals or human beings which they profess, actually. So if anything is held higher, leaving the human beings or the society away, he says it's an erasure of humanity, a condition that requires to be overcome, actually. Ambedkar was here, if you look into that particular premise, probably we can say Ambedkar was out to slay all the gods. So he was, in fact, no premising human and human welfare, rather than, in fact, no the simple propitiation of gods, actually. So rather he gives a picture that he is a slayer of gods, actually. And his quest to place humanity as the center and measure of truth is relentless. And this relentlessness is such that in slaying God, he wants to slay all the metaphysics that is surrounding around that particular thing. So he makes a declaration saying that all religions must be assessed by their social products. This has been, in fact, no, he brings out his main kind of a point of test. He says that all religions must be assessed by their social products. What sort of a societies, in fact, no, they are produced, and how the adherents to the religion, in fact, no, have been, and what sort of a society they have been living in. So here he also debases the antiquity of any religion, where in his what do you call review of Bertrand Russell's work as a student of Columbia University, he has reviewed a book by Bertrand Russell. That time, in fact, no, he was one of the prominent philosophers. That book, the title of the book is Reconstruction of Society. Ambedkar writes, in fact, no, and in that particular review, he takes head on Bertrand Russell. Basically, he critiques him, saying that it is not just, in fact, no, like the antiquity or the people, the society that lives in, or the religion that, in fact, no, is there. He says that it is not the antiquity of religion that matters, but the plane of survival of the adherents of that particular religion becomes crucial in judging whether a religion is a positive one or the otherwise. So here he makes things very, very clear, actually. Not just antiquity, it's sort of a secondary value. But the point is, the plane of survival of the people who have been, in fact, now practicing and following that particular religion, that becomes more important. So therefore, Ambedkar's real objective of religion should be the spiritual development of individuals. So he pegs it back, actually. He declared that a religion which did not grant an individual primacy was not acceptable to him. So that is where, of course, he also brings out his personal kind of a conviction over there. But is he atheist? But he, it's not like that. He says he opined that religion, in fact, now was necessary. He wrote, saying that, I quote, "When I condemn a religion of rules and prescriptions, I must not be understood to hold the opinion that there is no necessity for a religion for human beings and for society." He recognizes the utility of religion, actually, but that religion, in fact, now should be moral, and it should be beneficial to the human beings who follow. That has been in like. So therefore, friends, for Ambedkar, social justice, it was a touchstone for any philosophy or spiritualism. This touchstone, in fact, now he explicated, saying that it has three parameters: the values of liberty, equality, and associated life, which we otherwise call it as fraternity, actually. He had tested all religions, especially Brahminical Hinduism, on this touchstone, and discovered that not only Brahminical Hinduism, but also Islam and Christianity did not pass the muster, because he was looking into the practice of these religions in India, where he found that caste also, in fact, now has been an operative principle among the societies or among the people who practice these religions, which of course is another problematic for him. So now, friends, we look into his analysis of the philosophy of Hinduism, which of course he titled it as Hinduism. The title of the book itself is Philosophy of Hinduism, actually. It was a thick text, actually, in which Dr. Ambedkar makes two important kind of parts. First thing is, he says that which popularly being called as Hinduism is not Hinduism at all. Of course, he knows that Hindu, or the word Hindu or Hinduism has been a later import, because before 11th century, nobody knows that particular word called as Hindu or Hinduism. It was recorded, in fact, in the history, that it was Al-Biruni who first used the word, actually, word of as Hindu. And then, of course, later on, we don't find any of these texts, the Brahminical texts, the word Hindu was not there, actually. No text. You don't find that. Vedas or Vedangas, Shrutas, Smritis, Aranyakas, Brahmanas, Upanishads, epics, or even in fact no other kind of Purana, other literature. No literature which in fact no is now attributed to Hinduism. You will not find the word Hindu actually at all. So, like Dayanand Saraswati in 1885 says that the word Hindu basically is a label given by the outsiders to the people who are in India actually. So anyway, Ambedkar also was very clearly aware of that particular thing. But at the same time, not just about the label, he has very particularly created a binary. He says there is a Brahmanism and Hinduism binary, in which Brahmanism is problematic for him basically. So in his book, Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Ancient India, Ambedkar says that, I quote, in the first place, it must be recognized that there has never been such a common Indian culture, which of course he was talking about the recent, at that time it was recent when he was writing Revolution and Counter Revolution in late 1920s and early 30s. The Sanatan concept, in fact, have been what do you call, say, churned out of the Hindutva kind of a concept actually. The Sanatan came out that time. So he was saying that in the first place, it must be recognized that there never has been such a common Indian culture, that historically there have been three Indias: Brahmanic India, Buddhist India, and Hindu India. Unquote. Later in this book, he says that the history of India before the Muslim invention is the history of a moral conflict between Brahmanism and Buddhism. So this has been, in fact, now the point of departure, wherein he says, again I quote, the Aryan religion, which of course he was referring to Brahmanism, was just a series of observations and prescriptions. Behind these observations, there was no yearning for a good and virtuous life. There was no longer, there was no hunger or thirst for righteousness, unquote. So he was directly saying that, in fact, now those kind of a Brahminic literature, he calls it as the Aryan religion again. He says that he doesn't find any kind of a morality or virtuousness. They were just, what he was finding is, in fact, now the ritualistic practices and series of observations, which in fact now that has been there actually. So therefore, he writes that, and further he says, I quote, it is sad that it was done in the name of religion. For those who have understood Brahmanism, realize that Brahmanism uses religion as a front for its greed and for selfish political gains, unquote. So he later on, in fact, now goes on to say that this Brahmanism has become a part of Hinduism religion later on, and for years, in fact, now for years, it forced the Shudras, Atishudras, and women to lead a hellish life. So this is a kind of a binary he creates between the Brahmanism and Hinduism to properly understand, in fact, now the kind of a religion that prevails in India under this rubric called as Hinduism. And now, in fact, now his scrutiny, the second part, in fact, in the philosophy of Hinduism, he goes ahead with the scrutiny of this particular say. So his inquiry starts from the premise upon which what social ideal a given religion as a divine scheme of governance holds out. So he was very, very particular about the social ideal actually in a particular religion. He debases the argument that all religions are equally good and positive. He writes, in fact, now almost 2 pages on that, saying that there is a popular opinion and popular kind of an understanding that every religion is good, every religion is, in fact, now, like in a sense, beneficial for human beings. All religions are equally good and positive. He negates that particular position. He says that he doesn't say he cannot accept that kind of a what do you call commonality, or even in fact something. He says religions must be put to the test of scrutiny, whether they are really equally good and positive or not. His premise is that all religions, in fact, no, cannot be, like in a sense, generalized in such a way. So he applies two tests actually: the test of justice and the test of utility, to look into whether, in fact, no, the supernatural or the metaphysics of a particular religion how far it is useful for a kind of an equitable social order for the adherents. So he would like to judge the philosophy of Hinduism based on these two tests, the test of justice and test of utility. After elaborate inquiry into the religious texts, he quotes endlessly, like in a sense, because that was his necessity for him. He quotes, in fact, now many was from different sources, original sources, and he mentions that, I quote, if these conclusions are sound, which of course he makes, if these conclusions are sound, how can a philosophy which dissects society into fragments, which disassociates work from interest, which disconnects intelligence from labor, which expropriates the rights of men to interests vital to life, and which prevented society for mobilizing resources for common action even in the hour of danger, be set to satisfy these tests. So he in his touchstone, in fact, he says that because of these reasons, this particular, in fact, no, say religion doesn't qualify. So therefore, he concludes, I quote, says that the philosophy of Hinduism, therefore, neither satisfies the test of social utility, nor does it satisfy the test of individual justice, unquote. So this is again, like in a sense, he says that these tests, which in fact no, he puts before the social utility and then also in fact now justice, uh, he finds that a majority of people basically are like in a sense not benefiting from this particular kind of a faith. And he again goes on to other level where whether the common person in fact no, is benefited from this particular faith or not, the kind of a social utility that he is trying to practice it. And I quote, he says that Hinduism is not interested in the common man. The center of its interest lies in a class, and its philosophy is concerned in sustaining and supporting the rights of that class, actually. That is why, in the philosophy of Hinduism, the interests of common man as well as society are denied, suppressed, and sacrificed to the interests of a small class of supermen. Here, I think so, friends, he is consciously bringing the word Superman, where, like in a sense, he was equating it this sort of a situation to the kind of a niche, kind of a sort of like in a sense, a terminology. The word we know, Superman, basically is a niche, philosophical product. Actually, there he goes on to say that this condition, in fact, now can be conveniently called as spiritual fascism. He says that Brahmanism is the political ideology of the same character as the fascist and Nazi ideology and is thoroughly anti-democratic. He says that if this sort of a position is let loose, which is what in fact now the Hindu majority means, it will prove a menace to the growth of others who are right outside Hinduism and are opposed to Hinduism, unquote. So this is a kind of a like premise where he's trying to talk about that particular thing. Sometimes, in fact, no, he is not just in fact no a kind of a researcher or somebody who's interested in fact no critiquing kind of a social position, but he goes in fact now to the extent of say placing things as a visionary actually. So he writes, makes his position. His quarrel is not with the individuals. He says I write, well, he writes saying that, I quote, I hate Hindus and the Hindu religion because I'm convinced that it propagates wrong ideals and has a social life of the wrong kind. Just give me a minute. I continue his quotation. I do not oppose Hindus and Hindu religion only because of its failings in social customs. My quarrel is with its ideals, unquote. So therefore, he says that he has no problem with individuals. Some people say that Ambedkar was thoroughly against the Brahminical groups, Brahminical castes, and he was pitting himself quite against. No, as an individual, he has got many very good friends among all sections of the people, including the upper ranks with whom he has been fighting for, actually, fighting against. But the problem is, in fact, now he makes things very, very clear. He talks about the ideals of, in fact, now a faith, and the social utility of those ideals, and the benefits that accrue to the common person, each and every individual, actually. So that's why he says that he gives, in fact, no, in Annihilation of Caste, he says, he gives a very straight and direct kind of statement, saying that, I quote, uproot Brahmanism, the spirit of inequality, unquote. So this is the kind of a position, actually, Dr. Ambedkar has taken, and this is a position, and also, in fact, no, a kind of practice that he has done all through his life, a mission that he has, in fact, no, taken up all through his life, through many of his writings and action. So now we'll turn to other aspects which Ambedkar is not just limited to, say, Brahmanism or Hinduism, its texts. He was, like, in a sense, making an exercise all through his life with compared to religion. Uh, he had a very good brush, as I've been talking about, with Christianity, Sikhism, and other kind of things. As a student in Columbia University, when Ambedkar, in fact, now living in New York, in the Columbia University campus, he was living in fact, now, like, in a sense, the hostel where he was living, that is very close to a place called as Morningside Heights. So, and then it was also close to the Bronx area, where you have Harlem, Bronx. These are all black dominated places, Afro-American dominated places. Ambedkar, in fact, no, very thoroughly being a person who is very much interested in fighting for the justice to the downtrodden people. He has naturally been, in fact, a friend of many of his Afro-American, say, students, actually. So he has attended their churches, and at that time, uh, Christopher Quinn from University of Harvard, and also, in fact, no, Eleanor Joliet, who wrote the biography of Ambedkar, American again. She says that Ambedkar was thoroughly influenced by a kind of a movement that is going within the Christianity in America at that time, 1913s or 1920s, actually. It's called as social gospel movement. Social gospel movement is a kind of a strand in Protestant kind of Christianity, where it also, like, in a sense, demands that all people, in fact, no, must be treated equally, taking the dictum from the New Testament, saying that the Lord has God has created everybody equal. But as we know, of course, like, in a sense, all Christians do not live equally. Racism, in that particular sense, in fact, no, has been quite rampant out there. So the racism, in fact, no, like, in a sense, transgresses the religious affiliation within Christianity, like, in a sense, the triple K, KKK, Ku Klux Klan, it torches and at average 90 black churches in USA annually, actually. So therefore, friends, see, Ambedkar has aligned himself with that particular thing, and he has got very interested, basically, in that particular liberative kind of a movement. So then, of course, that led him to read, the kind of Christianity and his texts and all. When he was discussing with people, basically, he was discussing very thoroughly, like, in a sense. And of course, with Sikhism also, he was very thoroughly, in touch with, because he toyed with the idea of converting himself to Sikhism, or when he talked about conversion of many of his people, he seriously, in fact, not toyed with this idea of converting into the Khalsa. He has, in Mumbai, while he was in Mumbai, he has opened 3 Khalsa colleges, actually, which were actually promoted by the Gurudwara Prabandhak Society over there that time. So therefore, he was very well say interested in the different kinds of religions. He goes deep into that kind of an inquiry. But what he found is castes do exist in all of these religions, actually. He says, although caste is the official doctrine of Hinduism, he says that among Indian Christians, Indian Muslims, and also among Sikhs and Jains, caste has been, in fact, the organizing principle. He says the virus of caste, in fact, also infected the kind of religions which obviously had a doctrinal equality. they have notional equality, basically. The religious texts, whether it's Bible or in fact no Granth Sahib, or whether it is Jaina's text and all, whether the Quran, they talk about doctrinal equality, basically, or a kind of a notional equality among the adherents to that particular religion. So therefore, the division of caste, actually, the consideration of caste, have divided Indian Christians, Indian Muslims, Sikhs, and all other people. But his program basically is that he says that although castes exist in the Muslims and Christians alike, it will be meaningless to liken it to that of Hindus, where he says the Muslims and Christians need not destroy their religions for eradication of caste. Rather, their religions will support such movements to that extent actually. So therefore, he says that if the majority people of the India, who are in fact now like in a sense under the rubric of Brahmanic Hinduism, if they want to get rid of caste, he says they are apply dynamite to their religious texts and in fact no their religious strictures and scriptures which promote the religion of caste actually. So which promote those values, which promote in fact no those wrong ideals. That has been his conviction. So now, friends, coming back to those people who know about Ambedkar, they know pretty well that he gave a call to leave Hinduism, and then that he has given in 1935. But in the fag end of his life, 20 years later, in 1956, he is actually went into conversion, basically. So conversion to Buddhism. So what was that background actually? Why there was almost a 2 decades of say what do you call uh, temporal gap between those two things? And what exactly Ambedkar mean when he has declared saying that leave Hinduism? I am in fact getting out of Hinduism. What prompted him? What sort of a study? Like in a sense, so far we talked about in fact the study with regard as a philosopher, as a kind of an intellectual exercise, as a sincere kind of a what do you call interrogator of religions into looking into the social ideals actually and the social utility. But when we look into the background, actually, what point of Ambedkar's life made him to declare that he wants to take a decision to leave Hinduism? That particular aspect is very, very significant. 1935, preceding to that, my dear friends, there was a backdrop of relentless struggles that Ambedkar took up. They're all struggles of human rights, basically. 1927, when he during his Mahad Satyagraha, basically, and the Satyagraha is kind of a basic human right, is in fact no of right to life. That is in fact now he was fighting for the right to drink water, to draw water from a common municipal tank. So of course, when he was like that has been denied, basically, met with the physical kind of a thrashing. Then he went to say he moved the court, the British court, of course, where they gave him in fact no the kind of a say reprieve. Second time he came back, people expected that in fact Ambedkar would go directly to the tank, because with a kind of a court order in his hand, nothing stops him, basically. So people thought that he will go directly to the tank and then take water from it. Ambedkar never went there actually. He said he has arranged a meeting and where he declared, it is not just in fact no for a water, I'm just doing it. I am heralding a social revolution. This is what he said, I quote, I am heralding a social revolution against all man-made disabilities against the majority of the population. That is what he says actually. So this is a kind of a revolution where he says right, a movement of rights actually. Then in 1930s, 2930, he was led a movement called as Kalaram Temple Entry Movement. Kalaram was in Nasik. That the Kalaram temple was in Nasik, but that did not restrict to only Kalaram. The temple, in fact, the temple entry movement took place in Nagpur, Pune, Aurangabad, the Amravati, Akola, many parts of say Maharashtra. Even during the times where Ambedkar was abroad, like he was attending the first roundtable conference, these temple entry movements have been going on, but without any kind of a success. So this is the point which Ambedkar wants to prove. He says that I was never interested in entering the temples and then start doing bhajans. My intention is not that. My intention is to demonstrate that the caste Hindus who say that all people are Hindus, they were not very sincere in extending, in fact, now the religion or the religious kind of a practices to the rest of the population. This is a kind of a point of departure where Dr. Ambedkar, like in a sense, directly he had a tug with Gandhiji. Gandhiji basically says in Roundtable Conference, when Ambedkar wanted a separate electorate or a separate the rights for the ex-untouchables, Gandhi was vehemently opposing. He goes to the extent, in fact, now saying that untouchables were a part of Hindus. And he says that I cannot allow any kind of a separation of Hindus, basically, separation within Hindus. Then Dr. Ambedkar has to ask him squarely, Mr. Gandhi, if you say your religion is our religion, then your rights in that religion and our rights in the same very religion must be the same. Show me where are they. So this kind of a logical kind of an expression which Ambedkar gives. I'm sorry about this. And Gandhi doesn't relent. He says that whatever, in fact, no, you say, there can be a separation of, or there can be a separate representation to the untouchables only over my dead body. That was his, in fact, no, he takes that kind of a stand. So, on the backdrop of that, and then in the roundtable conferences, finally, we know, friends, Ambedkar could secure separate rights, in fact, no, separate civil rights, political rights for the ex-untouchables, which Gandhi and Hindu Mahasabha thoroughly opposed. Gandhi, in fact, went into a fast. We know that is called as a he was in jail, Eravada jail that time. But even in the jail, Gandhi went for fast unto death. Mr. Gandhi never went on fast unto death for freedom of this country, actually, or for any reason. This was the only occasion where Gandhi went into fast unto death. Not on his own behalf. Generally, people talk about 1932 September, people talk about Pune Pact, where people think that, in fact, no, there is an agreement or a truce between Gandhi and Ambedkar. But friends, in that particular thing, the historical fact is that the Pune Pact was not signed between Ambedkar and Gandhi. Gandhi was never signatory to that. But Gandhiji was fighting on behalf of Hindu Mahasabha that time. He was positioning himself as an ardent Hindu or a kind of a Protestant Hindu, actually, he was saying that. And where he says that I would anticipate a change of heart among the Hindus, actually, with regard to their attitude towards lower caste, which of course has been, Ambedkar said, it's a paternalistic thing. Ambedkar said that many Mahatmas have come and gone. They could not even raise the dust, actually. That's what he said with regard to the prevalence of caste system. So it was the Pune Pact has been signed by Ambedkar, and the other party was not Gandhi. Gandhi was only a mediator there. The other party which signed was Madan Mohan Malviya, Tej Bahadur Sapru, Munje, and G.D. Birla. All, in fact, now were on behalf of Hindu Mahasabha. Right? So, therefore, with these attempts, in fact, now to negate his efforts to secure human right to the people, and this backdrop, in fact, on 1932, 1933-34, Ambedkar was a member of a British colonial committee called as Lothian Committee, which also is called as Indian Franchise Committee, which drafted the Government of India Act 1935. That is the reason why Ambedkar, that is called as, in fact, no, a kind of a, what do you call, 3/4 of the constitution. So that is the reason why Ambedkar was the only person in India who had an experience of drafting a constitution, actually. That was the reason, in fact, now he was picked up, actually, for as a chairman of the drafting constitution. Actually, it is not the mercy or some sort of a sop given by Nehru or Gandhi, as many people think about. So in that particular Government of India Act, Ambedkar's interest, in fact, now is he has finalized the list of scheduled castes and list of scheduled tribes there. So immediately after 1935, like in the 1935 itself, immediately after his membership or his duty, his role in the Indian Franchise Commission, Ambedkar took up this meeting at Yavala near Pune, where he declared, saying that all my attempts to gain in human rights, to gain in equality, to gain in liberty has been futile with these particular caste Hindus. So therefore, he declares, saying that unfortunately, in fact, I am born as a Hindu, but I will not die as a Hindu. So that was his declaration. Immediately next year, 1936, this is the year where Ambedkar arranged a huge conference of Mahars, where he has brought out why we should go for a conversion. What are the reasons? And at the same year, in the same year, 1936, Ambedkar, in fact, now publishes Annihilation of Caste. So these are in fact now some sort of a historical aspects which I'm bringing out, so that we can understand what was going through his mind when he was doing these efforts and endeavors. So friends, uh, it was called a Mahar conference actually, because Ambedkar called his caste people immediately to convince them first. So 1936 the Mahar conference was a huge conference attended by nearly 3 to 4 lakh people actually. And for this conference, Ambedkar requested, say, um, B.S. Venkataraw, B.S. Venkataraw from Hyderabad, actually, a Telugu from Hyderabad, to be a president of that particular meeting, that Mahar conference, actually, 1936, where he has explicated almost in a long speech about the reasons why there must be a conversion act. They have to go, they have to leave Hinduism. If I can, like in a sense, mention about the banners put up at the pandals of that particular conference, probably they would reflect the reasoning that, in fact, now Ambedkar that he presents to the people. Actually, I will just read out these banners, which were, of course, have been documented actually. So they reflect, saying that the rationale that came out, in fact, no, they say that to become humane, convert yourself; to get organized, convert yourself; to achieve strength, convert yourself; to secure equality and to get liberty, convert yourself. This is one sort of type of slogans which are there in the banners. And there is another kind of introspective banners actually to say that why do you remain in that religion which does not treat you as a human being? Why do you remain in that religion which prohibits you from entering temples? Why do you remain in that religion which prohibits you from drinking water? Why do you remain in that religion which does not allow you to get education, which insults you at every step of your life? So this is another kind of a typology which makes people think over. Of course, Ambedkar has been talking about these things in his long speech. And then there is other, the next typology is he declares a religion which prohibits righteous relations between human beings is not a religion but a display of force. That's why he calls it as spiritual fascism. It disdains people, in fact, now that their position, in fact, now fixed permanently, in fact, now in such a city. A religion which treats recognition of humanity as irreligion is not a religion but a disease. A religion which allows the touch of unholy animals but prohibits the touch of human beings is not a religion but a foolishness. A religion which precludes one class from getting education, forbids it to accumulate wealth, to bear arms, is not a religion but a mockery of human life. A religion which compels illiterate to remain illiterate, poor to remain poor, is not a religion but a punishment. So friends, like you see the intensity of, in fact, no, say his say, like in a sense, rationale, the kind of reason that he's trying to put in to bring this kind of consciousness among common people who generally does not rationalize actually. And he that the banners they go on saying that those who profess that God is omnipresent but treat men worse than animals are hypocrites. He also says those who feed ants with sugar but kill men by prohibiting them from drinking water are hypocrites. Do not keep company of such people. Unquote. So these are the positions, in fact, now, or these are Ambedkar's criticisms against the practice of Brahminical Hindu religion and the plight of, in fact, now untouchables and also the lower castes in it actually. So he tries to bring them up, surface them categorically. So then he goes on to say that why conversion, why it was necessary. So that particular text of that particular thing has been published in Marathi called as Mukti Kaun Pathe. And English, in fact, no, it has been published as Which Way Salvation. That was the title of that particular thing, where he talks about conversion as an emancipation. And he declares, basically saying that, I quote, conversion is as important to the untouchables as is self-government to India. Both of them, the ultimate aim is to attain freedom. So this is the kind of analogy he's trying to bring in between the freedom movement and also, in fact, now freedom from the what you call dictates or freedom from the what you call the kind of a oppression of in a religion. Basically, he says that in Hinduism, conscious reason thoughts have neither any importance nor any scope. A Hindu must necessarily be a slave of either the Vedas or Smritis, or must imitate the great men and follow them actually. So that was a compulsion for a common person over there who professes that particular thing. So therefore, he says, I quote, conversion is the only right path of freedom, which ultimately leads to equality. The conversion is not the path of escapism. It is not the path of cowardice. It is surely a path of wisdom. That's what he says. For annihilating caste and the untouchability from among the untouchables, change of religion is the only antidote. He concludes his speech with a direction to the large audience. It was in 1936, actually. He concludes the speech by saying that, I quote, be your own guide. Atta Deep Bhava. It's a Pali kind of a text taken from Buddhism. Was quite significant way back in 1936. Take refuge in your own reason. Do not listen to the advice of others. Do not succumb to others. Be truthful. Take refuge in truth. Never surrender to anything. If you keep in mind this message of Lord Buddha at this juncture, I am sure your decision will not be wrong. Unquote. So, friends, in 1936 itself, he did not openly pronounce saying that we are all going to Buddhism. He said we are leaving Hinduism, that's all. But he was concluding, in fact, now suggesting the quote from Buddha, like in a sense, use your own mind, use your own reason. You do not, in fact, now become influenced by anybody. So be honest to the truth and then take a decision. So that's a kind of a direction he was giving. Why? Personally, like in a sense, what Ambedkar wanted and what later on he has been suggesting to the people actually. There are two different kind of positions. Personally, friends, Ambedkar's association with Buddhism is not neither in 1936 nor in 1956. Ambedkar's association with Buddhism dates back to 1926 itself. 1926, where Ambedkar, in fact, was attending Navan Brahmin conference organized at Baroda by the Maharaja Saiji Gaikwad of Baroda. There in 1926, Ambedkar meets a Buddhist monk. His name is Bodhananda Mahastavir. And their association, in fact, has continued for a long time, till 1950s, till Bodhananda Mahastavir, that monk, in fact, passed away. So he was thoroughly influenced by that personality. And we have seen, in fact, like in a sense, many of his lives. In 1933, he builds a house in Dadar, a huge house and all. and calls that house, names it as Rajagriha, again a Buddhist connotation. In the same year, when his wife passed away, he goes for a short-term Sramanir kind of a thing. For a 10 days, he becomes a Sramanir, which is in fact now a kind of an apprenticeship in among the Buddhist monks. And then in 1942, as I told you, like in a sense, he was under the tutelage of another Buddhist monk called as Ishwardat Medhardi from Kanpur, from whom he learned Pali. And he has in fact now, like in a sense, has been attending many Buddhist viharas all through his say what you call career, like in a sense life. During 1940s, 50s and all, Ambedkar was present in different kind of Buddha Jayanti functions. He was opening several Buddha viharas. So he was in fact no, like in a sense becoming a practicing Buddhist. That was his personal kind of a thing. But he did not actually like in a sense uh, uh, gave it to the people till 1956. But personally, he says, I quote, I prefer Buddhism because it gives three principles in combination which no other religion does. All other religions are bothering themselves with God, soul, and life after death. Buddhism teaches prajna, which of course Ambedkar explained, understanding as against superstition and supernaturalism. It teaches karuna, love and compassion, and it teaches samatha, equality. So he says that these three values are in fact now very, very important for a kind of a humane society, which in his opinion, he says that only Buddhism gives. But he found a problem with Buddhism, is that Buddhism also in fact now has been interpolated with many of the Brahminical kind of a references. So therefore, he found it necessary to salvage Buddhism, bring out the true Buddhism, actually, the real content of Buddhism, before he wants to prescribe it to the his followers. So it's a dilemma of, in fact, now one Buddha and many Buddhisms. Similarly, like in many, of course, we have these kind of different kinds of interpretations of the kind of a monolithic and organized religions are there. Buddhism also has undergone several, in fact, like oppositions from the Brahminical kind of a thing in the history, and also it has been appropriated and interpolated actually. So therefore, Ambedkar had to steer out Buddhism from the myriad mythical wrappings which have been woven around Buddha, and present him as the first creator of human rights movement actually, inculcating radical awareness and providing radical alternatives to the people at that time, during his time actually. So therefore, he had to write a text. He says, I want to write a Buddhist Bible. And then he came out, in fact, no, with that particular, he calls it, many people call it as the magnum opus of Dr. Ambedkar. He spent a lot of research into it. It came out as Buddha and his Dhamma, actually. So there, Ambedkar very clearly said, Buddha, his touchstone actually was reason and rationality, and then empathy towards society. So these are the three important elements. And any of the literature that is available in the name of Buddhism, he says that they must pass the litmus test of these three things: rationality, reason, and then social equality, basically. So therefore, he takes out all the other things which have been, in fact, no interpolations over Buddhist literature, and then brings out this particular thing. Then, for this particular exercise, Ambedkar had to turn towards his master, his teacher, Professor Jan Dewey, who had a lot of influence on Dr. Ambedkar actually, because Jan Dewey's pragmatism, philosophy of pragmatism, has been highly influential to Ambedkar in all his analysis actually. So he turned to his Jan Dewey for reconstructing philosophy and society in the light of scientific inquiry into the central message of the life of Buddha. So he discerned that only reflective thought is capable of breaking the spell of the Sanatan or eternal, which of course the kind of many religions were talking about. And of course, we can very carefully say that Ambedkar's Buddha basically is a Devanian Buddha, basically, because he was like in a sense couching between these two. Buddha's scientific inquiry of rationality and reason, as in fact now looked into the kind of a 20th century pragmatic philosophy which propounded by Professor Jandevi. So friends, we will just have, I'm not going to deal with what all Buddhism that is there, that's not as our purpose, but what influenced Ambedkar here, very briefly. Ambedkar found Buddhist inquiry to challenge the Brahminical metaphysics and the ethics of natural inequality that Brahmanism sanctions. Brahmanism, of course, obviously says that everything in this universe is unequal. It says that all physical objects, all celestial objects, everything is unequal, nothing is equal. So therefore, there is a natural inequality, which is also natural for a social inequality. And they did not stop there. They went to, in fact, no, they went to, in fact, inject inequality among the gods in themselves, basically. So therefore, Ambedkar brought, encountered this metaphysics with Buddhist kind of a logic. Ambedkar examined Buddhist logic as providing more realistic causal connections between experience and underlying, say, reality. In his mission of resurrecting human values, Buddha sought to raise the condition of Bahujans from subhuman position to the highest human level, because Buddha was the first person to bring out the identity called as Bahujan, which of course is being used now. Buddhist slogan of Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya, Lokana Kampaya. He says that in fact now for the benefit of the majority. And who were the majority? It is obvious actually. So therefore, Buddha's mission of resurrecting people, and Buddha's mission of education actually. So this is exactly what Ambedkar shows. Uh, Buddha's mission, in fact, now is understood as a kind of an exercise to dig out the very source of oppression actually, and putting them to critical examination. The Brahminical cultural hegemony, Buddha says, in fact, it's a clear strategy of colonization of the mind and capturing the social order. So this has been the problem, which in fact now the problem is colonization of the mind. Like in a sense, it creates a kind of an impression where an individual is not allowed to think on his or her own, basically. So it's a colonization of the mind, and through that there is a capture of the social order. So that is a kind of a the premise which Buddha has to tackle and the Buddha has to fight about. So Ambedkar brings out that the history of India is the moral conflict between Brahmanism and Buddhism. That's what he says. So what was that? In a nutshell, basically, we can see that Ambedkar positions revolution and counter-revolution. What was the Brahminical society during the time of Buddha, upon which Buddha has declared a revolution? He has made a revolution and then brought out revolutionary change. There are four important aspects. One is secrecy of knowledge. The Brahminical culture, in fact, no, it has banned education for the majority, made knowledge a kind of a secret, kind of a code. Second is the power of propaganda. Everything, like in a sense, has made mythical, and they said, in fact, there is a power of rituals, basically. So common people were under the spell of that kind of a power of propaganda. Third is constituting a social order in which the Brahmin is kept at the center. All things, in fact, now have been ultimately for the benefit of this particular section, the class which Ambedkar says. Fourth is the power of ritualization, which makes the priest as a social parasite. So this has been, in fact, now the important aspects which Buddha found and attacked. So where Buddha has, in fact, now started a mission of education, not in the language of the oppressor, Sanskrit, but in the language of the oppressed, Pali and Ardhamagati. Many of these bhikkhus, like in a sense, we turned them into missionaries. For the first time in the world, in the 6th century BC, we will find people who has taken celibacy, men and women, young men and women, who have dedicated their lives for the propagation of, in fact, of this particular mission. So they are called bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. Basically, they are brought into this monastic order for the first time, and then that monastic order basically is a kind of a democratic order. we know pretty well. Like in a sense, we will also talk about democracy, where Buddha has been the originator of democratic values for the first time in the world, including the practice of democracy or procedures of democracy, called as today we are using secret ballot system. That procedure was also invented and practiced by Buddha actually, and we'll talk about that in the say forthcoming topics and all. But Buddha's, like in a sense, revolution basically is to break the secrecy of knowledge and then make, in fact, no, like in a sense, dispersal of knowledge through these bhikkhus. Second is, like in a sense, through his Astanga Marga, right view, right thinking, right understanding, he has dispelled the power of propaganda, mythical propaganda of the Brahminical texts. The third is he has constituted a social order, which is a democratic social order, which of course later on Dr. Ambedkar says the Sangha, Bhikkhu Sangha is a microcosm of democracy, as a kind of a model democracy which people can follow basically. And fourth is, as against, in fact, no, the Brahminical priest as a social parasite, Ambedkar, Buddha has brought in Buddhist monks and bhikkhus and bhikkhunis as social volunteers. They are not parasites on the society. They give them education, Dhammadana, and they take Bhojan Dana basically. That's the kind of an exercise actually. So therefore, this is a kind of a revolution through which Buddha could bring down actually three important changes. One is that education has become, in fact, no common commodity for all. Second thing is there is equality between sexes. He says equality not between man and man, but between man and woman actually. Third important thing is, after Buddha, many of the rulers, in fact, in India have been from the Shudras, no more from the Kshatriyas. You see Bimbisara, Prasenajit, Ajatashatru, Ashoka, Kalashoka, Chandragupta Maurya, Brihadad, Nandas, all these people were Shudras. They were not Kshatriyas actually. It's a very important kind of a change that the Buddhist revolution has resulted in. So therefore, this is a kind of a game which Ambedkar says the Brahminical game lies in confusing the victims by not giving them education, by creating several illusions with limited awareness in such a way that their strength and power is always dissipated among themselves, leaving the minority, that Brahminical minority, in control of the total situation. Neutralizing and defocusing the majority by dividing is a successful social strategy that the Brahminical forces have perpetuated and have been perpetuating even now throughout the centuries as a continuous state of cultural warfare. This is what Ambedkar uses the word, the cultural warfare. So therefore, he says that reason and logic is the empowerment actually what Buddha brings in. That is, in fact, now the kind of a enlightenment he talks about. So reason has attitude, a temperament has potential to challenge the unexamined traditions. This is, in fact, now what Ambedkar says. The cultural demystification has been central to the Buddhist inquiry, and Ambedkar's Buddha has been a reason and scientific method sacralized. That's what we can see. In fact, no, he projects Buddha basically as a rationalist, a person who promoted reason and then scientific method of inquiry. With his Kalama Sutta, basically, like in a sense, Buddha says to common people, you have to think and then decide. You don't take. So Kalama Sutta says that, he says to common people, you have the right to reason, right to criticize, right to hold an opinion, right to in fact follow, or right to test these things. So, like in a sense, he was saying that it is for you to decide. He is not giving any dictum to the people basically. So that's the reason why Ambedkar says Buddha was a reason and scientific method sacralized. So therefore, friends, he also says that Ambedkar's say what you call analysis of Buddha, in fact, no, and his contemporary interpretation of Four Noble Truths based upon the three hermeneutic principles of reason, social benefits, and certainty. These are the three hermeneutic principles that we can deduce actually. The Eightfold Path, Ashtanga Marga, is seen as a way to remove injustice that human does to a human actually. So therefore, friends, he has talked about the centrality of prajna. Ambedkar asserts that Buddha's own renunciation and enlightenment as an exercise in pragya, which led to the establishment of a new social order. That's the point which he was trying to make. That is not just a philosophy. Buddhism is not just a philosophy, but a mission to create a new social order based on the democratic values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. So that's the point which he tries to take. Say Buddha, in fact, now encourages people. Buddha has given permission to ordinary men and women to trust their experience or authority of the Brahminical texts. Therefore, he asked them to treat their own experience basically as a touchstone and never think anything infallible. Any kind of a change, in fact, now can change to some other thing basically. So therefore, Buddha tried to show, as Ambedkar also was saying, that the law of anika or law of impermanence is there as an eternal kind of a principle. Anything can change, even if you can create a democratic kind of a society, that can also in fact no change unless you are there to in fact no like operate on that. And that's why Ambedkar says that Buddha also wants to say that in fact no, the citizens to become democratic community of inquirers. So that's the kind of a position which Ambedkar was very much interested in, and then he wants to bring it in the 20th century. So finally, like in a sense, friends, coming to what Ambedkar wanted actually uh, uh, to convert his people into Buddhism. He wants to bring in new identity, new personality, and a new social order. So that is exactly what he wanted. Say, even he was trying to do it through the constitution. See, a Buddhist is an identity, basically. I quote from Frizigar, an identity of an individual who is liberated from the bondage of dogma, an interrogator of the sources of oppression, and a self-consciously liberal and secular in the world, actually, in the worldview, basically. So this is an encapsulation of, like in a sense, Ambedkar's Buddhist identity. He says that, I repeat, it's an identity of an individual who is liberated from the bondage of dogma, an interrogator of the sources of oppression, a self-consciously liberal and secular in the worldview. So that's the kind of identity which Ambedkar, in fact, now wanted to give, and a kind of a new personality based on the ideals of pragya, sila, and wisdom, karuna. Pragya is wisdom, shila is character, and then karuna is compassion towards the society, or in fact towards the fellow beings. So therefore, in this kind of this thing, education becomes crucial to this change of personality, to become competent in conducting constant inquiry into the conditions of living in that kind of a society. So therefore, it's a kind of creating a new personality who is capable of self-actualizing actually. So finally, my dear friends, I would try to, like in a sense, point out, try to couch all the arguments, in fact, now, saying that why Ambedkar, or what Ambedkar was trying to, get out of organizing a conversion in 1956. Why not in 1936? He knows, basically, he says that with regard to Buddhism, he says that this Dhamma is for the energetics and the wise, not for the fools and cowards. That's what Ambedkar clearly says. Buddhist inquiry basically is an intellectual exercise. He says it is for the energetics and the wise, not for fools and cowards. So therefore, if you want to transfer this kind of a intellectual exercise into the common people, just like as Buddha had contemplated, in fact, after finding out a formula, Buddha was, in fact, now he says, I'm only a Margadata, not a Mokshadata. He said, I'm only human. I can give you a formula to live a kind of a exalted human life, actually. He says that human beings, basically, the way that they are living, Buddha says they are capable of elevating their lives into a higher human level. So for that, he says that I have a formula, and if you practice it, it happens. Otherwise, like in a sense, even you don't have to take it as he has given highest intellectual freedom to common people. He says that if you experience, or if you feel that experience, you take it. Otherwise, just leave it. Don't take it as somebody has said. Even Buddha himself has said that. So therefore, friends, why Ambedkar's the contextuality? Why in this particular time he was bringing it out. Ambedkar, in fact, now was very much interested in institutionalizing it, insist upon an epistemological revolution as a precondition for the creation of democratic and secular culture. This is very, very important for a constitutional, in fact, no living, where Ambedkar says, uh, of course, he talks about the incompatibility of ideologies. He says that the ideology, India is today governed by two ideologies. After submitting the constitution, draft of the constitution, he says that India today is governed by two ideologies. The ideology that is enshrined in the preamble of the constitution promises a life of liberty, equality, and fraternity. But the ideology that people follow in their daily life negates that particular thing, which he says the Brahminical ideology, basically. So therefore, the it requires, in fact, now a kind of an epistemological revolution for creation of a democratic and secular culture. So creation of new habits, new cultural habits is the most daunting task that we have in Indian democracy. So therefore, Ambedkar probably is the only thinker in India who brought grotesque phrase called as constitutional morality as an imperative for successful democracy. He was saying that without, say, Ambedkar says that constitutional morality is the necessity for a successful democracy in India. And how that morality can be instituted in the society. So therefore, he found Buddhism as the perfect platform for capacitating citizens into operationalizing democracy by, in fact, now using that reason and logic, by, in fact, now adhering to the constitutional morality, basically. And that's the reason why he says, I quote, Buddhist religion is nothing if no morality. It is true that in Buddhism, there is no God. In the place of God, there is morality. What God is to other religions, morality is to Buddhism, unquote. So this is the premise, in fact, now, where in order to attain, in fact, now constitutional morality, he says that there must be, in fact, now a religion which promises morality over the supernaturals, morality over the, say, no, metaphysical, kind of a wrapping. Ambedkar realized, friends, again like John Dewey, that the method and institutional arrangements for paving way in establishing new civil society in which norms are not dictated from above but arrived through a rational, open public inquiry. His turn to Buddha was an attempt to resurrect the Brahmanic cultural traditions of skepticism and reason that have so long been silenced by the mystic idealism of Brahmanism. Because in India we have a tradition parallel to the Vedic, if not in fact preceding to the Vedic, there is a tradition of, in fact, no, a scientific rational inquiry, materialistic thought by name called as Shramanic traditions. We know the traditions of Charvaka, Lokayata, Madhyamika, Kapila, Sankhya, Ajivaka, Makkal Gosal, Ajita Kesa Kambala, Jain and Buddhist kind of a tradition. Basically, all these basically, like in a sense, they are materialistic and also humanistic kind of a traditions. Not, in fact, no involving themselves with the metaphysics and all. They were looking into the proper or the exalted living of a human being in this very kind of a society. So therefore, friends, Ambedkar has says, probably this is my last quotation. Ambedkar says, I quote in this particular correction, positively, my social philosophy may be said to be enshrined in three words: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Let no one, however, say that I have borrowed my philosophy from the French Revolution. I have not. My philosophy has roots in religion and not in political science. I have derived these values from the teachings of my master, the Buddha. In his philosophy, liberty and equality had a place, but he added that unlimited liberty destroys equality, and absolute equality left no room for liberty. In his philosophy, law had a place only as a safeguard against breaches of liberty and equality. And Ambedkar says, Buddha did not believe that law can be the guarantor for the breaches of liberty and equality. So therefore, Ambedkar says, Buddha gave highest place to fraternity as the only real safeguard against the denial of liberty or equality or fraternity, which was another name for brotherhood or humanity, which was again another name for religion. So if at all there is a religion from Ambedkar, it is a religion of liberty, equality, fraternity. This is the only religion Ambedkar would countenance. Friends, by bringing secular, humanistic, civil religion, Ambedkar says it is possible. Always there need not be a theistic kind of religion. He says that a secular, humanistic, civil religion is possible, and he envisages through ushering that kind of a revelation, epistemological revelation. Ambedkar, in fact, now has envisaged in resetting the moral compass of the whole nation, in instituting democracy, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Thank you very much, friends, for your patient listening.
Thank you, Professor P.D.Satyapal Kumar sir, for your excellent presentation on the Ambedkar's anthropocentric religion. Now, dear friends, it's time for questions. If you have any questions or clarifications you want, please pose your questions to the speaker.
Can I?
Yeah, please, sir. Please
Thank
go
you
ahead.
so much. Professor Paul, that was an excellent presentation, and I learned a lot today from what you just presented. Now, it isn't a query, it's more of a statement. Two things, sir. To begin with, when you look at Hinduism, you rightly pointed out that we don't have just one Hinduism. There are various facets to the Hinduism. There's a one Hinduism with various facets. Now, within those different facets, you have different spaces, you have different content of those spaces, and within that, you have spaces for origin of different thoughts. For example, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, all three originated as branches of Hinduism and flourished as independent autonomous religion. Now, singling out one facet at the expense of so many other different ideas, how far this represents Hinduism? Because if you have Brahmin as the priest, you have at many places and in many sects, untouchables as the priest of the temples. When a Brahmin would go to those temples, he can't directly communicate with the supernatural. The supernatural has to be communicated by the Dalit, who is the priest of the temple. The sect exists at many places in many different areas. Now, similarly, when you talk about Buddhism, you mentioned this point, you touched upon this point, that there are many Buddhisms now. So on the one hand, we have Buddha, and on the other hand, we have many everyday Buddhism practices where you find all the ills, as you just mentioned about any religion, being a part of Buddhism. So as a student of anthropology, my query to you would be that religion has been used, religion has been utilized and religion has been a powerful point from where people have drawn support, they have drawn ideas, they have drawn strength to put forth their point of view. So instead of looking at it from the point of view of theology, from the point of view of ideology, from the point of view of values, looking at is an instrument to perpetuate certain ideologies, how valid the perspective would be.
Yeah, thank you very much for that reflection. But I am afraid that it requires a lot of kind of a justification to respond to your thing. First thing is probably I think so you must have joined late. I discussed with regard to the necessity of differentiating the binary, creating a binary called as Brahmanism and Hinduism, which has been in fact now is a fact.
But
In
sir,
the popular,
just 1 minute, just 1 minute, sir. Just 1 minute. When you speak about Brahmanism, again, Brahmanism is not a one type of a Brahmanism. There are many types of Brahmanism within Brahmanism.
like,
For example, a Brahmin from North India would be a very different from Brahmin from South India, and Brahmanism which is practiced in, say, Haryana.
I am not talking about the kind of a practices as rituals.
No,
My definition of Brahmanism, basically following Ambedkar, is entirely in fact no epistemological. Let me come back to this point. I will try to, my response I think so would also cover that particular aspect. Historically, like in a sense, in fact, what today is being called Hinduism, basically, in the popular discourse, it, as you rightly said, it has several streams and several kind of practices. I've been mentioning that the very word Hindu has been a later import. Till 11th century, there was no word called as Hindu or Hinduism, which is a historical fact. It was Al-Biruni, I mentioned in fact no, earlier when I started this particular discussion, was the first person to use that word Hindu. And if you look into any kind of like in a sense, people who were labeling themselves as Hindu, I find it was Goraknath who first in fact said that I am a Hindu, I am in fact kind of a say human person. So you'll find that in the Nath tradition, owning up as a Hindu identity, that's what we first see, 11th and in fact 12th centuries. Okay, before that there was no mention of word Hindu in any of the Brahminical texts that we see. That's what I said. You don't find that word reference either in the Vedas, Vedangas, Srutas, Smritis, Aranikas, Brahmanas, Upanishads, Puranas, even like in a sense epics. No, nowhere you'll find the word. That's a fact. They were actually called as a Brahminical text, and the label that they belong to Hinduism has been in fact a colonial construct, because the Europeans in fact they were used to that monolithic, what you call organized religion kind of a thing. They were looking into in fact what is called as a Hinduism or a Brahmanism. And I would rather say it was Max Muller who created a textual kind of a reference for the whole, what you call edifice called as Hinduism. His 56 sacred texts of Hinduism has been in fact now become a textual reference to many, to consolidate Hinduism as a kind of a constructive, what you call religion actually. Otherwise, it has been a loose kind of a this thing. That was one kind of a position which I want to make it clear. Second, what is being now referred to as Hinduism basically, if as a academics we want to look into that which is being professed in India as Hinduism, and if we define a religion basically which will have a set of supernaturals, a text of in fact religious text, and a kind of a metaphysics associated with that, and a kind of rituals in fact associated with that particular faith, and also a personal religious personal to it, that which is being now popularly in the discourse in fact called as Hinduism, can be conveniently divided into 6 different Hinduisms. It has been in fact, no, an academic text. I can give you references actually. The Vedic Hinduism, if at all, if you can call it as Hinduism as such, if you look into the Vedas, the gods are different, the rituals are different, the metaphysical understandings are different, because in the Rig Veda we will find the Lord of the Lord, in fact, no, is not either Vishnu or Shiva or Brahma. There was no reference to them actually. The Lord of the Lord is Indra. Of the 1142 slokas that you have in Rig Veda, 690 slokas are devoted to the praise of Indra, called as Lord of the Lords. The second prominence, in fact, in that line goes to Lord Agni, and then to the Varuna. So the set of gods is different over there. Later on, in fact, if you come into Brahmanas and Aranyakas, you have, in fact, no, the kind of a reference to the Purusha, the Brihaspati, not again Indra. So you have a second set of ritual kind of a thing. Then turn back into a 2nd century BC and 2nd century AD, we will find what is today being called as popular Hinduism, where you have a creator, an administrator, and then terminator, Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, and then all these kind of a paraphernalia that comes in the popular discourse, it comes in. Then that's one set of kind of a Hinduism, if we can categorize. Fourth would be the avataric Hinduism, post Sankaracharya, post the vehement, in fact, no, animosity between Vera Vaishnavism and Vera Shaivism. It was Sankaracharya who brought a truce between these two warring groups, and then created the Ayaka Shastra, where he gave the temple architecture for the Vishnu temples, temple architecture for the Shaivite temples, and he has given, in fact, now a strong kind of a dictum saying that hereafter one would not build the temples in the name of Vishnu, but on the Vaishnava avatars, not Shiva, but Shiva avatars, which we call later on called as avataric Hinduism, where you find different kinds of rituals, you will find different names of the gods, and then different kinds of religious, what do you call, quote unquote, sacred references. Then comes the cult, Hinduism later on. I don't have to, let's again elaborate. There is also, in fact, now during 17th and 18th century, the prominence of the lesser gods like Hanuman and also, say Ganesh. And we see in 21st century, basically 20th century, we see Godman Hinduism, where humans themselves, in fact, now say that we are gods. The Kalki avatars, the what do you call Sai Babas, maybe like in a sense you have many people like Amma Bhagavans. So they have a different kind of like in a sense text that they talk about, different kinds of ritual, different. So therefore, if you go by academic definition of a religion, you will find, if you use that word label called as Hindu, you will find 6 different religions, which supernatural gods do not relate to each other actually. So therefore, that is been there in the popular discourse as Hinduism. But along with this, we also have traditions which have been there, in fact, now from agro-based kind of Indus civilizational moorings, where the worship of village goddesses, that has been entirely a kind of a different thing. If as academics, if you see, if we go to any village in India, which village India is 70%, so even today, if we go to any village in this country and ask the villagers from Kashmir to Kanyakumari or Gujarat to Bengal, ask any villager, do you have village goddess for you or a village god? The obvious answer is we have goddesses. The pan-Indian phenomena of 7 sisters and 1 younger brother is a pan-India phenomena. And for those goddesses, you will not find a Brahmin priest. You will find caste specific priests, where of course you are referring to, even if a Brahmin goes there, he will have to, in fact, now, of course, it's very rare that Brahmins do not go to that particular thing. This Brahmins, in fact, now Brahmanism, they have Brahmanized many of these goddesses actually, right? So therefore, my point, in fact, now is that today what is under the common rubric, popular rubric called as Hinduism, is a popular kind of this thing. It cannot be, in fact, academically, or in fact, no, a serious researcher into religion would not be driven away by this kind of a kind of a common popular kind of a this thing. We need to get into that particular formulations and reformulations. So therefore, in all these kind of traditions which we are talking about, that particular aspect which in fact now divides people. See, one thing we need to find out is whether people live in a position of equality or not. No other religion in the world, whether the major religions or even in fact even the tribal religions and all, no other religions and no other religious texts, no other god would say that I have created my people unequally. Except for that, you will find in the Brahminical texts. We don't find such things in fact now in the popular Hinduism and then Hindu modes and all. You will find only in that part those particular references. In that particular epistemological kind of a congruence, you will find that those references. That is exactly what Ambedkar picked up. He picked up in fact now the roots of oppression or roots of inequality in the religious realm lies with those texts, and his like in a sense interrogation is with that particular text, and he finds not just Buddha, all these Brahmanic traditional people and all, they were in fact now being anti Vedic, anti ritualistic, and then in fact now anti is in fact now metaphysical kind of this thing, more of a materialistic or more of humanistic rather say. So this is a kind of a tradition in fact now which I'm trying to the bidirectional tradition which I'm trying to project, which Ambedkar picked up, and then all the while he been talking about in fact now Brahmanism, and he was trying to in fact now like in the Annihilation of Caste, he was saying that like in a sense he says, and I quote in Annihilation of Caste in the preface, he says that Hindus have been the sick people in this country. He says that Hindus are sick people in this country, and they have been affected with a disease called as Brahmanism. And the problem is not just with them, their sickness is causing problem to the whole nation. And in the Annihilation of Caste, he argues saying that will the Hindus dare to take it, to remove their malaise from within? So that's the kind of a position that Ambedkar takes, and that is what I'm trying to couch in this particular Ambedkar's understanding of an anthropocentric religion. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Professor Satyapal, sir, you were mentioning about the epistemological revolution that Ambedkar has picked up. The values that what would you please elaborate a little bit on the values of the epistemological revolution?
I'm talking about the philosophy of religions, which in fact Ambedkar did a survey. The philosophy of religion, where he went into the whole kind of a comparative theology that he has made, the basic foundations of which the whole metaphysics have been organized and then reasoned out in different kinds of religion, and finding out there are in fact now in almost all religions, like in a sense, there are certain aspects which can be commonly seen the agency of God. There is an agency of God mediated by through in fact of the religious text and the priest or a pastor, and ultimately, like in a sense, the epistemological revolution is that we should find out, test with each of that particular religious philosophy whether it is the its primacy is for the benefit of the human beings or the benefit of the social order, or just in fact to the religious order. That is what in fact now Ambedkar said about test of justice and test of utility. These are the two tests in fact now he says that, and finally he comes to the conclusion that in India requires a thorough epistemological revolution, where what are the social products of religion? That's what he says. All religions must be assessed by their social products. So, and in that he, like in a sense, which I also say that Ambedkar went on with this particular litmus test, and he says that in India, not just Brahmanism, Hinduism, even Christianity and Islam, they don't pass the muster. Why? Because we find castes even among the practitioners of Christianity, practitioners of Islam, practitioners of, in fact, no Sikhism. So that's the point, in fact, which says. So therefore, whether they are, in fact, no, like in a sense, religions which have doctrinal equality or a notional equality, but what exactly they are practicing in this soil, Indian soil? They have been practicing Brahminical lesson of, say, inequality in their religions, and precisely calling a large number of Hindus, basically, they themselves, their ideals basically are, as Ambedkar says, they were practicing the wrong ideals, which requires a kind of an epistemological revolution through rationality, reason, and then say, what do you call, fraternity. These are the touchstones which he talks about. Yeah.
The touchstone or the rationality, the empathy, the fraternity, or the constitutional morality. These are the areas where he launched his epistemological revolution. That's what you want to say.
I don't have to, in fact, know, like in a sense, abstract. You make an abstract of my own presentation.
Sorry.
I have laid out clearly, in fact, no much elaborately, what Ambedkar wanted, and finally, like in a sense, if at all there is a religion for Ambedkar, like as of course, Dr. Mitra has pointed out, yes, there are many Buddhism, because Buddhism, in fact, Dr. Ambedkar says, has been interpolated by Brahmanism. He says that there has been, in fact, an exercise of imposture. Either, in fact, either you attack it openly, and if you cannot do that, you join that and then kill it from within. So there are many things and all, but Ambedkar finally, if at all there is any religion for him, basically, like in a sense, it would be a religion which professes liberty, equality, and fraternity. That's what, in fact, now it is. So that's what Ambedkar said. There is every provision for a thinking mind to establish a secular religion, which of course he talks about. That's a what you call, in fact, a very innovative phrase which Ambedkar says. There can be a secular, civil, or a secular, civic, humanistic religion, which Ambedkar says, in fact, based on morality, rather than, in fact, being completely out for the kind of a theistic personality. That's the reason why Ambedkar states that a religion must not be theocentric, but it should be anthropocentric. So that's his premise, actually.
If this morality or moral essence is the character, the moral essence, without morality, Buddhism is nothing. That's one statement I see. I observed in your presentation. And if the moral essence or moral attributes of a particular God becomes what morality for Buddhism is, what God is for other religions, that kind of statement is also was made. So if in equality, in fraternity, and liberty, the fraternity or brotherhood is the foundation for morality, or where actually can we assure that if people are treated equally, is it morality, or where morality is grounded deeply?
If you are going for a humanistic kind of a value, equality definitely becomes a premise. Actually, liberty of thought and expression should be a premise, and then, in fact, all those people within a religion at least should be, in fact, exercise fraternity, actually. So the problem is, there has been, in fact, like in the sense, oral kind of a sermoning, but in the lived lives it has not been there. So then what is the use of having such preachings about those things in their lived lives? In the practicing, if it's not there, then it's not a kind of a it becomes a mockery, actually. So therefore, a real or a kind of a true religion should have these kind of a humanistic values internalized within the particular religion, and that has been like in a sense more or less the same kind of a thing in every religion. But the problem is with the practice. So that's what you said. All religions, in fact, no, must be assessed by their social products. What kind of a society is that we are building in, and what kind of a society, in fact, no, we see that that the adherents are practicing. If there is a problem, then it has to be repaired. Such exercise has not been there actually. That's what I'm saying.
The if the liberty, equality, and fraternity is assured, can we sure of morality in reality? That is my question.
See, if you isolate morality, morality in fact has different connotations. I think so. You got my point. We are not isolating morality as a kind of a point of argument. You have different types of moralities actually. One a moral thing for one society, a value which is beneficial, positive for one society, need not be moral for others. So therefore, you should get into that universal application of morality basically. So the universal aspects which in fact no practicable in a kind of a social morality basically are fraternity, treating everybody equal, treating in fact no like giving them all the scope, and also having an associated life, which is in fact no like basically a kind of a democratic society, which we call it as, not a polity. So that's the kind of a morality we are talking about. So but technically, like in a sense, you can differentiate within the morality actually. Religions also talk about morality. There may be in fact now some sort of a dharma both as a kind of a value of morality and also as a kind of a duty. So there may be a logic which in fact no rationalizes that, but ultimately, like in a sense, finally what product it brings out, that is more important. See that what people say is the test of what do you call thing is in the eating. The test of pudding is in the eating actually. So ultimately, what kind of societies they bring up, and how, ultimately, like in a sense, what social values are social, what sort of how like in a sense humanistic they are, humane they are actually. That's more important.
If liberty takes diverse from truth, if the fraternity takes diverse from justice, and what kind of society or social product that we can expect, and kind of.
No, that is exactly, I've been quoted also. I quoted, if you, for your convenience, if I want to quote, you want me to quote, I'll re-quote, saying that like in a sense, in fact, no, liberty and equality has similar place, but unlimited liberty destroys equality. Okay, and absolute equality will have no room for liberty actually. So therefore, the law in fact, even law comes as a restriction. I'm not just talking about a, what you call a written law, even a customary law within a religion, that comes in fact now as a kind of a safeguard against breaches of liberty actually, as a breach of liberty basically. That's what the religions are supposed to do. But unfortunately, like in a sense, there have been deviations from that for vested interest basically in practice. So that's a problematic actually. Okay.
Social justice and truth, they are the powerful concepts. Based on this, under the light of justice and truth, I think liberty and equality and fraternity can be really be safeguarded, well balanced. In reaction to inequality or injustice in society around, equality and fraternity, liberty are highlighted, but in the presence of justice only, in the presence of truth, I think these things can be really powerfully experienced, and I believe that
Yeah. So moving away from, of course, forgetting Ambedkar for some time. But what we talk about, in fact, now, like in a sense, the kind of morality basically is that individual morality and then social morality. Individual morality is more akin to having a character, which we call it as character actually. And social morality is, in fact, now having proper institutional arrangements for all the individuals in the society would have that kind of life. They realize that kind of a life. So a religion, which of course calls, in fact, no, it should have both the value and the same thing, in fact, no arrangement for such kind of a practice of that value. So that's a point which I'm trying to make. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's right. If there are no other queries, we can conclude.
Dear friends, and thank you for your valuable time listening to Professor P.D.Satyapal, sir. Thank you, Professor P.D.Satyapal, for your valuable information and excellent presentation about Ambedkar's intellectual and anthropocentric religion that sheds light and shows direction for epistemological revolution and constitutional morality that contributes for the nation building. A huge nation like us, India, needs epistemological revolution and the constitutional morality as an engine to accelerate the process of nation building. This is really timely and here, yeah, with much gratitude. Thank you for your excellent information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear participants. We will meet again for 8th session. Every alternative Wednesday, we are organizing at the same time, 6:30 p.m.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.